The gravel driveway twisted through a tunnel of wild rhododendrons before revealing the nightmare at its end. Ivy's pulse spiked. The house was a ruin, sagging under its own weight, paint curling like dead leaves. The rustic charm promised online had been a digital illusion. "Oh God," she breathed, fingers tightening on the U-Haul's wheel. Beside her, Autumn tilted her head, ever the optimist. "It has character." Ivy swallowed a laugh that sounded more like despair. "It has structural failure," she said, "and possibly tetanus. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra. Special for you, the gravel driveway, wound through overgrown rhododendrons before opening, onto a clearing that made Ivy's stomach drop. The homestead looked nothing like the listing photos. What had appeared charmingly rustic online was, in harsh afternoon sunlight, actively collapsing. "Oh God," Ivy whispered, gripping the steering wheel of their packed U-Haul. Beside her, Autumn leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "It has character. It has structural failure." Ivy's voice climbed an octave. "The porch is literally detaching from the house." We knew it needed work, but even Autumn's optimism sounded strained. They sat in silence, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at what they'd done with their combined life savings. The 1800s homestead sagged against the mountain backdrop like something out of a Gothic novel. Weathered clapboard, missing shutters, a stone chimney listing slightly left. 50 acres of dense Appalachian forest surrounded them, beautiful and isolating in equal measure. 3 months ago, Ivy Clark had been having panic attacks in bathroom stalls between financial analysis meetings. The memory surfaced unbidden. Her reflection in the corporate restroom mirror, mascara smudged, chest tight, wondering if this was it, if this was all her 30s would be. Spreadsheets and performance reviews, and the slowly crushing weight of a life that looked perfect on paper but felt like drowning. Autumn had shown up at her apartment that same night with Chinese takeout, and their grandmother's old photo album. "Remember what Grandma Sadie used to say? Mountain people don't quit, they just find another way." She'd flipped to a photo of Sadie standing in front of a cabin, fierce and smiling. "This property's for sale." Her property, the one she always talked about. Now here they were, two burned-out city women with no farming experience and a house that might not survive the next strong wind. "We can do this," Autumn said. More to herself than Ivy wanted to argue, to pull up her Excel spreadsheet of worst-case scenarios. Instead, she killed the engine and opened her door. The mountain air hit her, cool, pine-scented, so different from Atlanta's humid sprawl. Something in her chest loosened slightly. They walked the property in silence, their different approaches already evident. Ivy photographed structural damage, making mental notes about costs. Autumn sketched in her ever-present notebook, seeing the retreat center they'd dreamed about, meditation platforms in the woods, an organic garden where the lawn had gone wild, solar panels on that southern exposure. "You're doing it again," Ivy said, watching her sister draw. "What?" "Building castles before we fix the foundation." Autumn's pencil stilled. "And you're catastrophizing before we've even unpacked." They'd been having versions of this argument their entire lives. Ivy the pragmatist, Autumn the dreamer. It was why they worked, usually. Why they'd survived their mother's death when they were 12, raised by Grandma Sadie with her mountain wisdom and fierce love. Why they'd decided to do this impossible thing together. "Sorry," they said simultaneously, then laughed. A truck rumbled up the drive, and a man emerged, mid-30s, work-worn hands, flannel shirt despite the spring warmth. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes. "You must be the Clark sisters." Owen Mercer. He shook their hands firmly. "Welcome to Ridgeline." Something about his presence was immediately calming. He didn't flinch at the homestead's condition, just walked the perimeter with them, pointing out what could be saved and what couldn't. His assessment was thorough but kind. Yes, the porch needed complete rebuilding, but those old-growth beams inside were solid. The roof was shot, but the stone foundation was remarkable craftsmanship. "Your grandmother knew what she was doing," when she held onto this place, Owen said. This land's special. You knew Sadie. Ivy felt something catch in her throat. Not well, but everyone knew of her. She'd come up here sometimes, always alone. Locals wondered why she kept paying taxes on abandoned land. He glanced at them curiously. She never told you about it? Not really, Autumn said. Just stories about her childhood here. We didn't even know she still owned it until after she died. Owen nodded thoughtfully. Mountain people keep their own counsel. He checked his watch. I can start work Monday. Today, though, you should probably assess what you're dealing with inside. They thanked him and watched his truck disappear down the drive. Ivy felt oddly bereft when he left. His competence had made everything seem manageable. The house interior was worse than expected. Water damage had warped the floors. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, and everything smelled of mildew and time. But there were glimpses of beauty, too. A stone fireplace, wide plank floors beneath the rot, windows that framed the mountains perfectly. The basement, Ivy said, consulting the home inspection report. We need to check the foundation. The basement stairs groaned ominously under their weight. Autumn's flashlight beam cut through darkness, revealing stone walls slick with moisture and decades of accumulated debris. It was overwhelming. Collapsed shelving, rotted boxes. The detritus of abandonment. This is going to take weeks to clear, Ivy said. Her anxiety spiking again, but Autumn had stopped moving. Her light fixed on something in the corner. Ivy, look! Tucked behind a collapsed shelf was an old steamer trunk, the leather straps intact despite the moisture. It bore initials burned into the wood, S.C. Sadie Clark. They hauled it upstairs with reverent urgency, setting it on the least damaged section of floor. The lock was rusted but gave way easily. Inside, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, journals, dozens of them. Their grandmother's spidery handwriting covering page after page. Photographs, too. Sadie as a young woman standing in front of this very house. Others showed people Ivy didn't recognize. Some of the photos old enough to be daguerreotypes. Autumn opened the top journal. Reading aloud, May 3rd, 1989, another year of guarding what was entrusted to us. The weight grows heavier, but I cannot fail those who came before. I pray the next generation will understand what I could not do alone. The sisters looked at each other. What was she guarding? Autumn whispered. Ivy turned pages carefully, finding more cryptic entries. References to the chamber, to justice delayed, to secrets that could destroy or redeem. And then, tucked between pages near the back, a hand-drawn map. The basement, rendered in careful detail, with one section of wall marked with an X and a single word, truth. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, casting the room in gold and shadow. They sat surrounded by their grandmother's mysteries, their exhaustion from the drive forgotten. Somewhere in this crumbling house, Sadie had hidden something. Something important enough to document, to protect for decades, to leave them clues to find. Ivy felt her anxiety transform into something else. Purpose, maybe, or destiny. She looked at her sister and saw the same recognition in Autumn's eyes. Their new life had just become infinitely more complicated, and possibly infinitely more important. Over the next 3 days, the twins fell into an obsessive routine. By day, they worked alongside Owen, clearing the basement, hauling out rotted lumber and debris, while maintaining careful normalcy. By night, they pored over Sadie's journals by lamplight, piecing together fragments of a story their grandmother had spent decades protecting. Listen to this, Autumn said on the third night, her voice hoarse from dust. The weight of secrets can crush you, or it can forge you into something stronger. I chose to be forged. I pray they will, too. Ivy traced the basement map again, her analytical mind cataloguing every detail. The wall she marked, it's the north section. Owen said, that's the oldest part of the foundation, original to the 1800s. We need to look more carefully. Without Owen noticing, Ivy's anxiety spiked. He's down there with us every day. Autumn met her eyes. Then we go at night. The decision felt momentous, the first conscious choice to deceive someone who'd shown them nothing but kindness. Ivy thought of Owen's easy smile, the way he'd stayed late yesterday to help them fix the water pump. The way her stomach flipped when their hands accidentally touched passing tools. "Just until we know what we're dealing with," she heard herself say. That evening, they pleaded exhaustion and sent Owen home early. The moment his truck disappeared down the drive, they grabbed flashlights and crowbars and descended into the basement with purpose. The north wall looked like any other section, rough stone mortared together over a century ago. But when Ivy ran her hands across the surface, following Sadie's map exactly, she felt it. Temperature differences, slight inconsistencies in the mortar. "Here," she breathed. "Autumn, feel this." They worked carefully, chipping at mortar that crumbled too easily, revealing joints that weren't structural but decorative. A false wall. Behind it, darkness. "Oh my God," Autumn whispered. "Ivy, this is real." Ivy's hands shook as they widened the opening. Every instinct screamed to stop. "Call authorities. Do this properly." But louder was Sadie's voice from the journals. "Wait for the right moment. Trust your blood." The passage beyond was narrow, forcing them to move single file. Their flashlights revealed hand-carved stone, careful craftsmanship designed to be hidden. After 20 feet, it opened into a chamber. What they found stole Ivy's breath completely. The room was perhaps 10 feet square, its walls lined with wooden shelves and crates. On the shelves, leather-bound documents in protective cases, their pages yellowed but preserved. Artifacts that even Ivy's untrained eye recognized as Civil War era. Uniforms, weapons, tools. And scattered everywhere in rotted leather bags and wooden boxes, coins. Gold coins, their surfaces dulled by time, but unmistakable. But it was the crates against the far wall that made Autumn grab Ivy's arm, hard enough to bruise. Wooden boxes, their slats stamped with faded lettering, CSA Treasury, inside. Carefully stacked gold bars. "This isn't possible," Ivy whispered. "This can't be real." Autumn was already moving, photographing everything with shaking hands. "It's real." "God, Ivy, do you know what this means?" The Confederate Treasury gold was legendary. Historians have been searching for it for over a century. Ivy's mind raced through calculations she couldn't complete, legal implications she couldn't fathom, consequences that spiraled beyond her ability to process. Her anxiety wasn't spiking, it was free-falling, taking her stomach with it. "We have to report this immediately." "Wait." Autumn grabbed her wrist. "Just wait. Let's think. Think. Autumn, this is stolen government property from the Civil War. There are probably federal laws. It was in our basement, on our property, that we legally purchased. That doesn't—" Ivy stopped, because she didn't actually know what that meant legally. "We need to call someone. The police or— And tell them what? That we found millions in gold and just wanted to hand it over? Ivy, we'd lose everything. You know we would." The sisters stared at each other in the flashlight beam, the weight of discovery pressing down like the earth above them. "I'm not saying we keep it," Autumn continued, her voice urgent. "I'm saying we need to understand what we're dealing with before we make irrevocable decisions. Grandma Sadie kept this secret her entire life. There has to be a reason," Ivy wanted to argue, but uncertainty paralyzed her. What if Autumn was right? What if they reported this, and government seizure left them with nothing but a mortgage they couldn't afford? What if Sadie's life of secret-keeping had been for a purpose they were about to destroy through impulsive honesty? "1 week," she finally said. "We research, we figure out our options, then we decide. But Autumn, we're not keeping stolen property. I don't care what it's worth, I know. But something in—" Autumn's eyes suggested her sister was already calculating. Possibilities. They spent hours cataloguing everything with photographs and careful notes. The documents were fascinating. Letters, manifests, what appeared to be military correspondence. The artifacts were museum quality. And the gold. Ivy stopped trying to estimate its value when the numbers became absurd. Finally, they carefully replaced everything, sealing the false wall with temporary mortar that would pass casual inspection. Upstairs, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Neither sister slept. Ivy lay in her room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the enormous weight of their secret pressing against her chest. This changed everything. Their simple dream of a farm and retreat center now sat atop a fortune that wasn't theirs, wrapped in history they didn't understand, connected to a grandmother whose secrets ran deeper than they'd imagined. In the next room, she heard Autumn pacing. At 3 a.m., her sister knocked softly and entered without waiting. They sat together on Ivy's bed, shoulders touching, both staring into darkness. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm scared," Autumn admitted. "Me too. What do you think Grandma wanted us to do?" Ivy thought of Sadie's journal entries, her references to justice delayed, to guardianship, to waiting for the right generation. "I think she wanted us to understand something before we acted. I just don't know what." Outside, headlights swept across their window, a car moving slowly past the property before continuing down the dark mountain road. The sisters looked at each other, fear crystallizing into something colder. "Did anyone follow us from Atlanta?" Autumn whispered. "No, why would they?" But neither could shake the feeling that their discovery, made in darkness, in secret, in a hidden chamber that had waited over a century, had somehow already been noticed. Someone was watching, and their simple mountain retreat had just become something far more dangerous. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness of Ivy's room, casting blue light across both sisters' exhausted faces. 3 days of obsessive research had yielded answers that only complicated their situation. "Listen to this," Ivy said, reading from a historical archive. "In April 1865, Confederate President Jefferson Davis fled Richmond with what remained of the treasury, gold, silver, and bonds worth millions. The treasury was supposedly moved south, but most of it vanished. Only a fraction was ever recovered." Autumn leaned closer. "And historians think it was stolen?" "Theories vary. Some say Union forces seized it. Others claim Confederate officers absconded with it. There's even speculation that enslaved people or Underground Railroad operatives took it." Ivy scrolled through academic papers. "But most historians think it's a myth, that the gold never existed in the quantities described or was spent long before the war ended. Except we know it's real," Autumn said quietly. "It's sitting 30 feet below us." Ivy's stomach churned. The more she learned, the more complicated their moral position became. Finder's laws varied wildly by state and situation. Treasure trove doctrines, archaeological heritage protection, federal seizure of stolen government property. Every legal avenue led to a maze with no clear exit. "Here's the nightmare scenario," she said, pulling up a legal precedent. "Couple in Tennessee found Civil War gold on their property in 2018, reported it immediately. The government seized everything, claiming it was stolen federal property. The couple got nothing, not even a finder's fee. They ended up with 6 figures in legal debt, fighting a case they ultimately lost." Autumn was silent for a long moment. "And if we don't report it?" "Then we're committing a federal crime. Concealing stolen government property, probably a dozen other charges." Ivy rubbed her temples, where a headache pulsed. "But the practical reality is, if we report it, we lose everything. The house, our savings, any hope of the life we came here to build. That's not justice, and maybe not, but it's the law." Downstairs, Owen's truck pulled up. He'd been arriving earlier each day, probably sensing their distraction and trying to help. The sound of his presence made Ivy's guilt sharpen. Every conversation with him felt like a betrayal now. Every smile she returned heavy with deception. "I'm going to contact a historian," Ivy said, making a decision. Anonymously, just to understand what we're dealing with historically. She'd found Dr. Eliza Reeves through academic papers, a Civil War specialist whose research focused on the Underground Railroad and resistance movements. Her email was carefully worded, theoretical questions about artifact authentication, hypothetical scenarios involving undocumented treasures. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Over breakfast, they maintained normalcy with Owen while their minds churned with secrets. He noticed, of course. His quiet observance missed little. "Everything okay?" he asked Ivy, setting down his coffee. "You seem distracted lately." Just overwhelmed, she said, hating how easily the lie came. The scope of this renovation is bigger than we thought. His hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. You don't have to do it all at once. Rome wasn't built in a day. The kindness in his eyes made her want to confess everything. Instead, she smiled and changed the subject. That afternoon, Autumn spread papers across the kitchen table, a vision board of projects the money could fund. Community gardens, scholarships for local kids, a community center, small business grants for struggling mountain families. Look at this, she said, her artistic hand sketching possibilities. We could actually help people, Ivy. Real, tangible help. Isn't that better than letting the government bury it in some vault? It's not our money to distribute. Whose money is it then? Confederate officers who fought to preserve slavery. A government that let this region fall into poverty for generations. Dead men who stole it first? Autumn's passion built with each question. Or maybe it belongs to the people who live here now, who could actually benefit from it. Ivy wanted to argue, but found her certainty wavering. The moral high ground seemed less stable than it had days ago. She'd spent her life following rules, being responsible, doing what was expected, and where had it gotten her? Burned out, anxious, barely surviving financially. Now for once, she had the chance to actually do something meaningful. We don't even know if it's legally ours to report, Autumn pressed. Maybe we need to understand the full situation first. Maybe there's a way to do good with this that doesn't involve just surrendering it. That's rationalization, maybe. Or maybe it's recognizing that morality is more complicated than blindly following laws written by people who don't care if we sink or swim. They were saved from escalation by Ivy's laptop chiming, an email response from Dr. Reeves, received with alarming speed. Your theoretical questions are remarkably specific. If you've actually found something, you need to understand what you're dealing with. The Confederate Treasury legend is more complex than public history suggests. There's evidence that some caches were stolen by enslaved people as acts of resistance, not by Confederate officers. The historical implications would be revolutionary. We should talk. Call me. The sisters stared at the screen. She knows, Ivy whispered. She knows we found something real. Or she's desperate enough to believe we might have. Autumn chewed her lip. But what she said about enslaved people stealing it, that changes everything, doesn't it? It did. If the gold had been taken as an act of resistance, as funding for freedom seekers, then was returning it to the government the moral choice? Or would that erase the courage of people who'd risked everything to claim a piece of justice? Ivy's carefully constructed ethical framework was crumbling. Every answer spawned new questions. Every principle collided with another. That night, they fought properly for the first time since arriving. We report it, Ivy insisted, her anxiety manifesting as rigid control. Monday morning, we call the authorities. We document everything. We do this legally. And lose everything? Our savings, this house, any chance at the life we wanted? Just to feel morally superior while some government bureaucrat gets a promotion. It's not about feeling superior. It's about not going to prison for concealing stolen property. It's about you being too scared to take a chance for once in your life. The words exploded from Autumn, surprising them both. Just once, Ivy? Can you not automatically choose the safe, responsible path that leads nowhere? The silence that followed vibrated with hurt. I'm going to bed, Ivy said finally, her voice tight. She lay awake for hours, Autumn's words echoing. Was she being moral or just fearful? Was her resistance to keeping the gold based on ethics or on her pathological need to follow rules and avoid risk? Around midnight, her laptop chimed again. Another email from Dr. Reeves. This one more urgent. I'm in the area conducting research. I'll be in Ridgeline tomorrow. We need to talk in person. If you've found what I think you have, you're in danger. Others are looking for this. Some of them aren't historians. Ivy's blood ran cold. She rushed to Autumn's room, finding her sister also awake. Staring at her phone. Someone was on our property tonight, Autumn said without preamble. The motion sensor we set up by the basement entrance. It triggered 20 minutes ago. Then the camera mysteriously stopped working. The sisters looked at each other in the darkness, their argument forgotten, in the face of a more immediate threat. Their secret wasn't as secret as they'd thought, and Dr. Reeves's warning suggested they'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple legal dilemma. Dr. Eliza Reeves arrived unannounced at 9 a.m., her small sedan rattling up the drive like an omen. She emerged carrying a leather bag stuffed with papers, her appearance disheveled in that specifically academic way, expensive glasses held together with tape, designer blouse paired with worn jeans, hair pulled back with what appeared to be a pencil. "You found it," she said without preamble, her eyes bright with barely contained excitement. "I knew it. The moment I read your email, I knew." Ivy blocked the doorway. "We don't know what you're talking about. Please." Eliza's laugh was almost giddy. "I've spent 15 years studying the Confederate Treasury legend. Your questions weren't theoretical. They were too specific, too informed. And the timing, this location, it all fits the pattern I've been tracking." Autumn appeared behind Ivy, assessing. "What pattern?" Eliza pulled out a map covered in annotations. "Look, throughout the 1860s and 70s, there are documented accounts of suddenly wealthy families in this region, people who'd been destitute acquiring property, funding schools, supporting freed people during Reconstruction. The money appeared to come from nowhere, and all the recipients had connections to Underground Railroad activities." She traced routes with her finger. "They believe Confederate gold was stolen, not by officers trying to preserve it, but by enslaved people and their allies. It was hidden in safe houses along the network, used to fund freedom and resistance. Your property appears in several historical records as a way station." Despite herself, Ivy felt drawn to the map. "That would mean that what you found isn't Confederate treasure, it's liberation treasure. And if I can prove it, it would fundamentally change how we understand resistance during the Civil War." Eliza looked between them. "I need access to whatever you found. This could revolutionize Civil War historiography." "We haven't found anything," Ivy said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then why is Marcus Blackwood in town asking about your property?" The name meant nothing to Ivy, but Autumn's sharp intake of breath suggested otherwise. "The antiquities dealer." "From Atlanta?" Eliza nodded grimly. "He's a descendant of Colonel Silas Blackwood, who allegedly hid Treasury gold before Richmond fell. Marcus has spent his family fortune and 20 years searching for it. If he's here, he knows or suspects something." As if summoned by his name, a Mercedes SUV appeared on the drive, incongruous against the mountain backdrop. The man who emerged was exactly what Ivy expected and feared. Expensive casual wear, practiced charm, and eyes that calculated value in everything they touched. "Marcus Blackwood," he introduced himself, his smile not reaching those assessing eyes. "I'm a historical consultant. I understand you've recently acquired this fascinating property." "It's not for sale," Ivy said immediately. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of asking you to sell." "Not immediately." His laugh was smooth as oil. "But I am intensely interested in its history. You see, my family has connections to this land going back to the Civil War. I'd love to discuss potential collaboration, perhaps a historical survey. I'd fund it entirely, of course." "We're not interested," Autumn said. Something flickered behind Marcus's charm, frustration or perhaps desperation. "I think you'll find I can be very persuasive and very generous. Whatever you might have found or might find, I can ensure you're properly compensated." "Are you threatening us?" Ivy's anxiety transformed into anger. "Threatening? Good heavens, no." But his smile had teeth. "Simply pointing out that valuable historical artifacts require expertise to properly evaluate and sell. Amateur mistakes can be costly." Owen's truck rumbled up the drive, and Marcus's expression soured briefly before smoothing into neutrality. Owen emerged, taking in the scene with quick understanding. "These folks bothering you?" he asked the twins, positioning himself protectively. "Just leaving," Eliza said quickly. Marcus lingered, extracting a business card. "My offer stands. Think about it carefully." His eyes lingered on the house, specifically on the basement windows, very carefully. After both visitors left, Owen made coffee while the sisters decomposed. "Marcus Blackwood has a reputation," Owen said quietly. "Rumors of stolen artifacts, shady deals, connections to some dangerous people. If he's interested in this property, that's a problem. He can't just—" Autumn started. "He can't legally, no. But men like that don't always operate legally." Owen met Ivy's eyes. "What's going on? What are people looking for here?" Ivy wanted desperately to tell him, but fear paralyzed her tongue. The day deteriorated further when County Commissioner Clayton Burke arrived with a clipboard and a too-friendly smile. "Just a courtesy visit," Burke drawled, his accent thick as molasses. "Making sure you folks understand all the property regulations. Lots of compliance issues with historical properties, permits, inspections, tax reassessments. Easy to make expensive mistakes if you don't have proper guidance. We have a lawyer," Ivy lied. "Oh, I'm sure you do, sweetheart. But local lawyers understand local complications." His smile never wavered. "I'd hate to see you run into unexpected obstacles. Property ownership can be surprisingly fragile, especially for outsiders." After he left, Autumn pulled up Burke's public records. "He's been investigated twice for corruption. Never charged, but the pattern's clear. He targets people who don't know how things work here, squeezes them until they sell cheap to his associates." "Let me guess," Ivy said bitterly. "Marcus Blackwood is an associate." That evening, checking the basement, they found fresh footprints in the dirt they'd deliberately left undisturbed near the false wall. Someone had been inside. Someone had found the chamber, but nothing was taken. On the workbench sat a business card, crisp, federal, ominous, Agent Raymond Cole, U.S. Department of Treasury, Asset Recovery Division, and handwritten on the back, "We need to talk." Soon, Ivy sank onto the basement stairs, the weight of it all crushing. They'd been in the mountains less than 2 weeks, and already they were surrounded by people who wanted something from them. The historian, the dealer, the corrupt official, and now a federal agent. "We can't do this alone," she said finally. "Autumn, we're in over our heads." Her sister sat beside her, their shoulders touching like they'd done since childhood when things got scary. "I know," Autumn whispered. "I know." Above them, the house creaked in the wind, and somewhere in the darkness outside, people watched and waited, circling like wolves who'd scented blood. The note appeared at 2 a.m., slipped under their bedroom doors while they slept. "They know." Chamber compromised. "You're in danger. Get help." A friend, Divy and Autumn, met in the hallway, both clutching identical papers, both pale with fear. They rushed to the basement together, hearts pounding, and found the false wall partially dismantled. Careful work, professional, leaving the entrance exposed like an open wound. But miraculously, nothing was gone. The gold remained stacked, the artifacts undisturbed. Instead, on top of the nearest crate, another note: "Report this, and they'll seize everything. Keep silent, and they'll take it by force. There's a third way, but you need allies. Trust carefully." "Who?" Autumn breathed. "Who's leaving these?" Ivy's mind raced through possibilities. Dr. Reeves, Agent Cole, someone else entirely. Whoever it is, they're right about one thing. We can't protect this alone. The decision came easier than it should have. At 3 a.m., they called Owen. He arrived within 20 minutes, hair disheveled, concern etched deep. "What's wrong?" And finally, standing in their kitchen with dawn still hours away, they told him everything. The journals, the map, the hidden chamber, the gold, the historian, the dealer, the federal agent. Their fear, their indecision, their paralysis. Owen listened without interruption, his expression cycling through disbelief, awe, and growing alarm. "Jesus Christ," he finally said. "You've been dealing with this alone for a week?" "We didn't know who to trust," Ivy said, and realized how much that admission hurt, that she'd been too afraid to trust him. This man who'd shown them nothing but integrity, his jaw tightened, hurt flickering across his face. "I've been here every day. You didn't think I'd help you?" "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "I was scared." of the legal implications of losing everything, of trusting someone. His voice was quiet but firm. Ivy, I understand fear, but you can't survive here alone. Not in these mountains, not with what you've found. You need people. Autumn cleared her throat. So what do we do? Owen considered, his practical mind working through problems like he worked through construction challenges, methodically, breaking complexity into manageable pieces. First, you need someone who knows the real history here. Not an outside academic, someone with roots deep enough to understand what this land means. He pulled out his phone. Mama D. Washington. Her family's been on the adjacent property since Reconstruction. If anyone knows the truth about what's buried here, it's her. It's 3:30 in the morning, Ivy protested. Mama D doesn't sleep much anymore. And trust me, she'll want to know about this. Dolores Washington arrived at dawn, a woman in her 80s, moving with surprising spryness, her eyes sharp as cut glass behind thick frames. She accepted coffee, surveyed the sisters with unsettling intensity, and said simply, "Show me." In the basement chamber, surrounded by gold and history, Mama D stood silent for a long moment. Then she laughed, deep, rich, cathartic. "Lord have mercy. It's real. 70 years I've wondered if Papa's stories were true." She settled onto a crate with casual authority and began to speak. "My great-great-grandfather was named Isaiah, born enslaved on this very land in 1840. During the war, this property became part of the Underground Railroad. White woman named Sarah Crane ran it, divide her own family to help people escape north." Mama D's eyes grew distant, seeing into the past. In April 1865, Confederate officers came through here fleeing Richmond, carrying Treasury gold they'd stolen from the government, planned to use it to fund continued resistance. But Isaiah and the others, they had different ideas about justice. "They stole it," Autumn breathed. "Stole what was already stolen," Mama D corrected. "Took gold that represented 4 years of death and enslaved it to freedom instead. They hid it here, used portions over decades to fund schools, buy land for freed people, support families that otherwise would have starved or been forced back into sharecropping that was slavery by another name." She met their eyes directly. "This isn't Confederate treasure. This is liberation treasure. Blood money turned to freedom money. And my family's been guardian to that secret for 5 generations. Ivy felt her understanding shift completely. "Our grandmother, Sadie Clark. I knew her." Mama D smiled softly. "She married into Sarah Crane's bloodline. That made her a keeper too, though she came to it late. We talked sometimes, her and I, about the burden of carrying history, about waiting for the right moment to tell the truth." "Why now?" Ivy asked. "Why did she lead us here?" "Because the time for secrets is ending. Because this generation needs to understand what resistance looked like, what justice cost." Mama D's voice strengthened. "And because she trusted you to do what we couldn't, bring it into the light properly." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock upstairs, authoritative, insistent. Through the window, they saw a federal vehicle. Agent Raymond Cole stood on their porch, credentials already out, his weary face set in professional lines. "Ms. Clark and Ms. Clark, we need to talk about what you found." There was nowhere left to hide. They invited him in, where he joined the unlikely assembly in their kitchen. 2 corporate refugees, a local contractor, an elderly black woman, and now a federal agent. Cole laid out the situation with bureaucratic precision. He'd been tracking this cash for 15 years, following murder investigations across 3 states, people killed for fragments of information about the treasure's location. The Blackwood family's obsession had turned violent before. "I have the authority to seize everything," he said. "But I'd rather work with you." His eyes, weary but kind, studied them. "Your grandmother contacted my predecessor decades ago. He promised her that if the treasure surfaced, he'd protect her family. He died before that promise could be fulfilled. I'd like to honor it by taking everything," Autumn challenged, "by doing this legally, which protects you from Marcus Blackwood and every other vulture who'll descend once word gets out." Cole leaned forward. "There may be a path where you're compensated, But only if we act before someone forces our hand. The kitchen door burst open. Dr. Reeves, breathless. Don't say anything to him. The government will erase the real history. They always do. How did you... Ivy started. I followed Blackwood's man. He's been surveilling your property. Eliza's academic excitement warred with genuine concern. If you let Treasury seize this, it'll disappear into federal storage. The story will be sanitized, the resistance narrative erased. This is too important. The room erupted into argument. Cole insisting on legal procedure, Eliza demanding historical preservation, Owen trying to mediate, Mama D watching with bemused patience. Finally, the elderly woman's voice cut through. You're all circling around what matters, missing the heart of it. Silence fell. This treasure is a testament, Mama D continued, to people who took justice into their own hands when the law failed them. Now you have to decide. Do you hide it again, let the government bury it in procedure, or do you trust enough people to tell the truth together? Ivy looked around the kitchen at this unlikely assembly, people with competing interests, but perhaps compatible values. Can we trust each other? She asked simply. The answers came slowly, each person weighing commitment against uncertainty. But one by one they agreed to try. Outside, through the window, a figure moved in the tree line. Marcus Blackwood, watching their gathering with binoculars, his patience clearly ending. The game was about to change from negotiation to confrontation, and they just barely formed an alliance to face it. They worked through the night and into the next day, an unlikely coalition hunched over Sadie's journals, while Agent Cole secured the perimeter and Owen reinforced doors with locks that might actually stop intruders. Mama D proved invaluable, her oral history filling gaps in Sadie's cryptic entries. Together, they pieced together a story that rewrote the twins' understanding of their family. Here, Ivy said, finding an entry from 1975. Today, I learned the truth about my grandmother, Sarah. Not the respectable mountain woman I was raised believing, but a radical who defied everything, her family, her race, her expected role. She helped dozens escape, married a freed man during Reconstruction when such unions invited violence, and spent the rest of her life protecting what they'd claimed from chaos. Mama D nodded. Sarah Crane and Isaiah Washington, your bloodline and mine, bound by shared purpose. Autumn was sketching family trees, her artistic mind making visual sense of tangled relationships. So Grandma Sadie was Sarah's granddaughter, which makes us descended from both enslaved and enslaver, from those who fought for the South and those who resisted it. Mama D's voice was matter-of-fact. That's the real history of this region. Complicated, mixed, nothing like the simple stories either side once told. Dr. Reeves photographed everything with reverent care. This documentation is extraordinary. Sadie was meticulous. She tracked how the money was used over generations. Schools built, land purchased, families supported through Reconstruction and Jim Crow. This proves organized resistance continued for decades after the war. A later journal entry, dated just months before Sadie's death, made Ivy's throat tight. I'm dying, and the secret dies with me unless I trust my granddaughters to carry it forward. Ivy, my careful one, so afraid of making mistakes she forgets to live. Autumn, my dreamer, so eager for impact she sometimes misses complexity. Together, they might find balance I never could. I'm leaving them the land and the burden. God forgive me if I'm wrong. She knew, Autumn whispered. She knew exactly who we were. Ivy felt tears threaten. Her grandmother had understood her anxiety, her risk aversion, her tendency toward paralysis. And rather than judge, Sadie had trusted her anyway. A photograph fell from between pages. Young Sadie standing beside an elderly black man, both smiling despite the tension evident in their postures. On the back, in faded ink, me and Isaiah Jr., 1962. Keepers of the Flame. Mama D touched the photo gently. That's my grandfather. He and Sadie used to meet here, making sure the chamber stayed sealed, watching for anyone who got too curious. She was threatened, Agent Cole said, pulling up old case files on his laptop. Multiple times, the Blackwood family harassed her in the 1980s. Vandalism, legal threats, even an assault charge that was mysteriously dropped. She contacted my predecessor in 1989, but he advised her to keep quiet for her safety. And she did, Ivy said bitterly. She carried this alone for decades because the system couldn't protect her. Owen entered with coffee, his presence grounding. Marcus Blackwood's vehicle is back. Third time today, and Commissioner Burke's been making calls. I heard from my cousin, who works at the county office. He's preparing some kind of legal action against your property. The trap was closing. That evening, the legal papers arrived. The twins had 48 hours to vacate the property due to irregularities in the title transfer and unpaid historical tax. Assessments that somehow totaled more than the property's worth. It's a shakedown. Agent Cole confirmed, scanning the documents. Completely fabricated, but fighting it would take months and thousands in legal fees. By which time Blackwood would have found a way to access the basement, so we're just supposed to leave. Autumn's voice rose. Abandon everything? Dr. Reeves paced, thinking aloud. What if we go public? Use media attention to protect the site and your rights. Treasury would have to seize it immediately, Cole warned. We couldn't wait, but there might be a finder's fee, Mama D said quietly. Not the full value, but enough to matter. And more importantly, the truth would be told properly. Ivy felt Owen's hand find hers under the table. When she looked up, his eyes held steady reassurance. The man who'd watched his own wife die, who'd rebuilt his life through service and connection, who valued integrity over comfort. What would you do? She asked him. I'd tell the truth and face whatever came. He squeezed her hand. But I'm not the one who has to live with the decision. That night, while others slept in shifts, Ivy and Autumn sat on the porch watching stars wheel overhead. Their first kiss had happened weeks ago, but now, with danger pressing close, Owen pulled Ivy against him in the darkness, solid and warm and real. I don't want to lose this, she whispered. Any of this. The land, the dream, you won't lose me. His lips brushed her temple. Whatever else happens. Inside, Mama D was teaching Autumn about Isaiah, his courage, his cleverness, his determination. My hands are shaking as I type a response. Appointment was fine. Still recovering. Need more time to think about everything. His response is immediate. Take all the time you need. No pressure. Just excited about the possibility. No pressure, he says. But the texts keep coming. The enthusiasm pushing at me like a wave I can't escape. I look at Dr. Okonkwo's referrals again. When do you plan to be pregnant for yourself? The truth is, I've never let myself think about it. Being pregnant was something I did for Ethan and Vanessa. It was a service, a gift, a sacrifice. It was never about me, never about what I wanted. Do I want children of my own? I don't know. I've been Aunt Cheska, Aunt Mama, the woman who births babies and hands them over. I've never imagined being just Mom. I start the car and pull out of the parking lot. But instead of going home, I drive aimlessly through Portland's streets. The city is waking up fully now. People rushing to work, living their lives, making their own choices. My phone rings. Grace. I almost don't answer. But something makes me pull over and pick up. Hey, I say, my voice rough. Cheska. You okay? You sound weird. And just like that, the dam breaks. I tell her everything. The dinner, Ethan's request, Dr. Okonkwo's warning, the referrals clutched in my hand. The words pour out in a rush, and Grace stays silent on the other end, just listening. When I finish, she's quiet for a long moment. Then, Cheska, I'm coming over. Right now, we need to talk. Grace, you don't have to. I'm coming over, she repeats firmly. Go home. I'll be there in 30 minutes. She hangs up before I can argue. I sit in my parked car, watching the rain streak down the windshield, and realize that for the first time in 3 months, I don't feel entirely alone. Dr. Okonkwo's question echoes in my mind. When will you be pregnant for yourself? Maybe never. Maybe I've already given away that future piece by piece, pregnancy by pregnancy, organ by organ. Or maybe, and this thought terrifies me, maybe it's not too late to choose differently. I pull back onto the road and drive toward home. The referral's on my passenger seat like a promise I'm not sure I'm ready to keep. But for the first time since Ethan asked me to give more, I'm starting to wonder, what if I said no? What if I chose myself? What would that even look like after 13 years of choosing everyone else? I don't have answers yet, but as I park in my building's garage and take the elevator up to my loft, I realize something has shifted. Dr. Okonkwo planted a seed, not the one Ethan wants, but a different kind. The seed of a question I've never let myself ask. What do I want my life to be? And for once, I'm starting to think the answer might not include sacrificing everything I am for everyone else's dreams. I'm sitting on my couch, staring at the referral forms, when Grace bursts through my door. I gave her a key years ago, back when we were roommates in college, and she never gave it back. Right now, I'm grateful for it. Okay, she says, dropping her purse on my kitchen counter and heading straight for my wine rack. We're talking about this. All of it. Grace Park is 30, a family law attorney with sharp eyes and sharper words. She's child-free by choice, drives a Tesla, and takes exactly zero nonsense from anyone. We met freshman year at Portland State when she caught me crying in the library over a failed chemistry exam. She bought me coffee, told me chemistry was stupid anyway, and we've been inseparable ever since. She pours 2 glasses of red wine, hands me one, then sits down next to me and picks up the referral forms from the coffee table. Donor trauma specialist, she reads aloud. Fertility preservation. Jesus, Cheska, this is serious. I know. Do you? She sets down the forms and turns to face me fully. Because from where I'm sitting, you're still considering doing this again. After everything. I'm not. I stop. Am I considering it? I don't know what I'm doing. Grace takes a long sip of wine. I need to show you something. Hold on. She gets up and retrieves her laptop from her bag, opening it on the coffee table. After a few clicks, she pulls up a folder labeled simply, Cheska, what is this? Documentation, Grace says. I've been keeping track for years. I knew this moment was coming. She opens the first file. It's an email from me, dated 7 years ago. The subject line reads, I got in. I lean forward, my chest tightening as I read my own words from the past. Grace, you won't believe it. Columbia accepted me into their documentary program. Full scholarship. I start in September. This is everything I've ever wanted. I'm going to New York. I'm actually doing this. I don't remember sending that, I whisper. You did. You were so excited you called me at 2 a.m. screaming. Grace scrolls to the next email, dated 2 months later. Grace, I need to talk. Ethan and Vanessa asked me to be their surrogate. They've been trying to have a baby for 3 years and nothing's working. Vanessa's devastated. Ethan says I'm their only hope. I know the timing is bad with Columbia, but it's family. I can defer for a year, right? It's just 1 year. My hand shakes as I set down my wine glass. Grace opens another file. Here's your deferral letter to Columbia. First time. She opens another. Here's the second deferral 2 years later when they asked you to carry Noah. And here, she pulls up a final document. Here's the email from Columbia saying they couldn't hold your spot any longer. You'd missed too many deferral deadlines. I stare at the screen, at the words that end with, we wish you the best in your future endeavors. I forgot, I say quietly. I forgot I got in. You didn't forget. You buried it. Grace closes the laptop. You've been burying everything you want for 13 years, Cheska. Ever since your mom died. The mention of my mother makes my throat tight. Don't. We have to talk about her. She's the reason you can't say no. Grace, your mom died when you were 16. You were a kid. Ethan was 20, an adult. But somehow you became the one responsible for him. Why? I stand up, needing to move, needing space. Because she asked me to. She made me promise. Show me. What? Show me where she made you promise. I want to see it. My hands are shaking now. Grace, I can't. Yes, you can. Where do you keep her things? I gesture weakly toward my bedroom closet. Grace walks past me, and I follow, watching as she opens the closet door and pulls out the cardboard box I haven't touched in years. The box labeled Mom in my teenage handwriting. She carries it to my bed and opens it. Inside are pieces of my mother, her favorite scarf, still smelling faintly of her perfume. Photos from before she got sick. A cookbook with her handwritten notes in the margins. And at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, my journal from that year. Grace pulls it out and hands it to me. Read it. I can't. Cheska. Read it. My hands shake as I unwrap the tissue paper. The journal is purple, covered in stickers I thought were cool at 16. I open it to a page marked with a dried flower, and there it is. My handwriting, young and desperate. September 15th. Mum died today. The cancer took her so fast. 1 year from diagnosis to gone. I held her hand at the end. She could barely talk, but she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Take care of your brother. Promise me." "Don't let him be alone," I promised. I said, "I promise I'll take care of Ethan. I promise I'll make sure he's happy. I promise I won't let him be alone." She smiled and closed her eyes. 3 hours later, she was gone. Ethan is devastated. He locked himself in his room and won't come out. Dad is useless, just sitting in the garage, staring at nothing. It's up to me. I have to hold everyone together. I have to keep my promise. I won't let her down. I'll take care of Ethan, no matter what. The words blur as tears fill my eyes. Grace sits beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You were 16, she says softly. "Your mother was dying. She was scared for her son. She asked you to look out for him, and you heard it as sacrifice everything for him forever. She made me promise. She asked you to take care of him, not to give him your organs, not to be his surrogate 3 times, not to give up Columbia and your career and your own life." Grace takes the journal from my hands. "Cheska, she was asking a 16-year-old to make sure her 20-year-old brother wasn't alone during their grief. She wasn't asking you to become his eternal life support system." I press my hands to my face. "I can't break my promise to her." "You're not breaking a promise. You're misinterpreting what she asked." Grace stands up, pacing my small bedroom. "Your mom loved you. If she could see what you've done for Ethan, 2 surrogacies, a kidney donation, giving up your entire future, don't you think she'd be horrified? Don't you think she'd tell you to stop?" "I don't know. I do. Because I knew your mom, Cheska. I met her. She came to our dorm room that one time, remember? She brought us cookies and told me to make sure you didn't study too hard. She wanted you to be happy. She wanted you to live your life." The memory surfaces my mom in our tiny dorm room, smiling, healthy, before the diagnosis, telling me she was proud of me for getting into college, for chasing my dreams. "She wouldn't want this," Grace says firmly. "She wouldn't want you disappearing piece by piece. Ethan has weaponized her memory, and you've let him because you were traumatized and 16. And desperate to keep some piece of her alive." I look at the journal, at my desperate teenage handwriting, at the promise I've been keeping for 13 years. "I don't know how to stop," I whisper. Grace kneels in front of me, taking my hands. "You start by saying no, just once, just this time. You tell Ethan that you can't be his surrogate again, that you've given enough, that you need to live your own life. He'll hate me. Ivy's fear of wanting, Autumn's fear of having nothing. But here's what I learned too late. Love survives disagreement. What matters isn't never fighting, but fighting fair and finding your way back to each other. You will. You always have. Trust that." The sisters read it together, tears streaming. "She knew us so well," Autumn whispered. "She knew herself," Ivy corrected, "and saw us in her struggles." They slept that night in the same room, like they had as children after their mother died, needing the proximity, the reminder that whatever else changed, they had each other. In the morning, they called Agent Cole and made it official. The split was decided. 6 million to the foundation, 2 million retained for property and stability. The legal machinery ground forward, paperwork proliferating. But the core decision was made, yet external pressures mounted. The Blackwood family's legal challenges gained unexpected traction when a sympathetic judge agreed to hear their hereditary claims. Confederate heritage groups organized protests, their rhetoric growing more aggressive. And universities began competing viciously for custody of the artifacts, each claiming superior preservation capabilities while clearly coveting the prestige. Dr. Reeves faced a brutal choice. Her university's administration, seeing the media attention, demanded she withdraw from the project to avoid partisan controversy. If she refused, they'd deny her tenure and terminate her contract. She came to the property looking haggard, her academic excitement dimmed by institutional politics. "They want me to choose between my career and my integrity," she said flatly. "Publish through the university and give them control of the narrative, or leave and lose everything I've worked toward for 15 years. What will you do?" Ivy asked. Eliza was quiet for a long moment, staring at the mountains. "I became a historian because I believed truth mattered more than comfort. Somewhere along the way I forgot that. Got caught up in tenure politics and publication metrics and departmental status. This discovery, Isaiah's story, it reminded me why I started. Some things are worth more than job security." "You're leaving the university," Autumn said. "I'm leaving academia entirely. Going independent. Maybe writing for public audiences instead of other academics. And I'm testifying in the Blackwood case about the treasure's true origins, regardless of what pressure they apply." She smiled tiredly. "Feels terrifying and right simultaneously. The foundation will need a historian in residence," Ivy said impulsively. "The salary won't match university pay, but I'll take it," Eliza said immediately. "This work matters. That's rare enough to be worth the sacrifice." The Blackwood hearing arrived with unwelcome speed. In a county courthouse, lawyers for Marcus's distant cousins argued that genealogical records proved hereditary rights to the gold, regardless of how it was obtained. Their case relied on property law and inheritance statutes, carefully avoiding moral questions. The twins sat with Mama D and Dr. Reeves, while Agent Cole testified about the gold's origins, stolen federal property, documented seizure by Confederate officers, clear chain of possession showing theft. But the Blackwood attorneys were skilled, casting doubt on oral history, questioning the authenticity of Isaiah's story, suggesting the twins and Mama D had fabricated history to justify keeping stolen treasure. "Isn't it convenient?" "Ndest," the lead attorney asked Mama D on cross-examination, "that your family's oral history perfectly justifies possession of millions in gold." Mama D's response was steel wrapped in silk. "What's convenient is your client's family spending generations searching for gold they claim was rightfully theirs, despite that claim resting on theft from a government they'd betrayed. What's convenient is dismissing 5 generations of black testimony as fabrication because acknowledging it would destroy your case. What's convenient, sir, is your selective commitment to historical truth." The courtroom rippled with reaction. The judge, an older white man whose sympathies were unclear, called for order. Dr. Reeves testified next, presenting documentary evidence, letters, manifests, historical records corroborating Isaiah's involvement in Underground Railroad activities, contemporary accounts of suddenly wealthy freed people in the region, architectural records showing schools and churches built with mysterious funding during Reconstruction. "This isn't oral history fabricated for convenience," she stated firmly. "This is documented fact, supported by multiple primary sources. The Blackwood family's claim rests on a Confederate officer's alleged hiding of Treasury gold. Our evidence shows that gold was taken from those officers by people they'd enslaved and used to fund freedom. The historical record is clear for anyone willing to look honestly, but the judge seemed unmoved, his questions skeptical, his demeanor suggesting the case would hinge on property law technicalities rather than moral truth. They left the courthouse exhausted and uncertain. "We might lose," Ivy said quietly that evening. "We might," Mama D agreed, "but we told the truth anyway. That matters independent of outcome." Owen, who'd attended the hearing despite still recovering, pulled Ivy close. "Whatever happens with the money, we have the land. We have each other. We have purpose. Those aren't things courts can take." But that night, lying awake, Ivy confronted a darker fear. What if they'd done everything right and still lost? What if truth wasn't enough, and power triumphed as it so often did? What if speaking out had changed nothing except to destroy the quiet life they'd sought in these mountains? She found Autumn awake too, sitting in the darkness. "Are you scared?" Ivy asked. "Terrified," Autumn admitted. "Not of losing the money, of what it means if the Blackwoods win. That nothing changes. That the same families who profited from slavery still profit from its legacy. That truth loses to legal technicalities. Mama D says telling truth matters independent of outcome." "Mama D has faith I don't have." Autumn's voice was small. "I want to believe her. I want to believe we did the right thing. But what if we just destroyed ourselves for nothing?" Ivy had no answer. So instead, she sat beside her sister in the darkness, shoulders touching, both staring into uncertainty. The verdict would come eventually. The foundation would launch or wouldn't. The artifacts would be properly preserved or lost to institutional politics. Their financial security would materialize or evaporate, but tonight they had what they'd always had, each other, and the courage to keep trying even when success wasn't guaranteed. Sometimes that had to be enough. Outside, the mountain stood, unchanged, patient, bearing witness to another generation, learning the hard truth that justice was work, not reward. Something you committed to independent of outcome, trusting that the commitment itself mattered even when results remained uncertain. Sadie had understood that. Isaiah had lived it. Now the twins were learning it too, the hard way, as most important lessons were learned, but together, which made all the difference. 6 months transformed everything and nothing. The Blackwood case concluded with a split decision that satisfied no one and freed everyone. The judge ruled that while genealogical claims had technical merit, the documented use of the gold for public good over generations created a legal principle he termed transformative justice. Property obtained through theft could change moral status through generations of beneficial use. The Blackwoods received a nominal settlement that barely covered their legal fees. The twins kept their finder's fee. And the precedent, scholars noted, would reshape property law discussions for decades. Marcus Blackwood was serving 8 years for assault and weapons charges. Commissioner Burke had been removed from office and awaited trial for corruption. The county was slowly recovering from decades of systemic grift. The homestead stood transformed. Solar panels gleamed on the south-facing roof. Organic gardens sprawled across the former lawn, tended by the first cohort of retreat participants, formerly incarcerated individuals, learning sustainable agriculture and finding second chances. The crumbling porch had been rebuilt, expanding into a wide deck where people gathered for evening meals cooked communally. Ivy stood on that deck now, watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed so much history, and felt something she barely recognized: peace. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Owen appeared beside her, moving easier now that his ribs had healed. He'd essentially moved in 3 months ago, neither of them bothering to discuss it formally. It simply made sense. This man who'd become home as much as any place. Thinking about Grandma Sadie, wishing she could see this. Ivy gestured at the property, the gardens, the solar panels, the people laughing over dinner preparation. "We did it. What she hoped for. You did more." Owen pulled her close. "You made it your own while honoring her legacy. That's harder than just following instructions." The Sadie Clark Freedom Foundation had officially launched 2 months ago, with a ceremony that drew regional media and genuine community celebration. $6 million, carefully structured to provide sustainable funding for generations. Their programs focused on 3 pillars: education scholarships for students from marginalized communities, small business grants for local entrepreneurs, and restorative justice work, supporting formerly incarcerated people's reintegration. The first scholarship recipients, 5 students from the county, had been announced last week. Their photos now hung in the foundation's small office, faces bright with possibility. Mama D had wept seeing them, recognizing the continuation of work Isaiah had started over 150 years ago. Autumn emerged from the house, paint-stained and energized. She'd converted the old barn into a studio, creating artwork that told stories of resistance and resilience. Her first gallery show, pieces inspired by Isaiah, Sarah, and Sadie, had sold out within hours, with proceeds donated to the foundation. Critics called her work viscerally political yet deeply personal, which she'd laughingly said was the most accurate description of her life currently. "Dinner in 20, she announced. "And we have guests. Eliza's bringing her first draft of the museum exhibit proposal." The regional museum had won the fierce competition for artifact custody, largely because they'd agreed to design the exhibit in full partnership with descendant communities. Dr. Reeves, now officially the Foundation's historian in residence, had spent months facilitating conversations between historians, community members, and museum professionals. The resulting proposal centered Isaiah's story while acknowledging complexity, the treasure's Confederate origins, its liberation by enslaved people, its transformation through generations of use for communal good. "It's not about heroes and villains," Eliza had explained during an earlier planning session. "It's about people making impossible choices in impossible circumstances, and the ripples of those choices across time. That's richer than any simple narrative." The exhibit would open next spring, Time to coincide with the 160th anniversary of the gold's original seizure. Schools were already booking field trips. Agent Cole appeared rarely now. He'd retired officially, though he'd attended the Foundation launch and stayed in occasional contact. Before leaving, he'd said something that stuck with Ivy. "I spent 15 years chasing this treasure, thinking closure meant solving the case. Turns out closure meant seeing it used right. Thank you for that." The Foundation board meeting happened weekly around the kitchen table that had become their informal headquarters. Mama D served as board president, her lifetime of community knowledge invaluable. Eliza handled historical documentation and education programs. Owen managed property development and construction projects. Local community members filled other positions, ensuring the Foundation remained grounded in actual needs rather than outsider assumptions. Autumn ran the arts programming. Workshops for young people, artist residencies, exhibitions that connected historical resistance to contemporary justice work. She'd found her calling, channeling creative energy into community building. Ivy, surprisingly, had become the Foundation's executive director. Her financial analysis skills translated perfectly to non-profit management, but more importantly, her journey from anxious corporate refugee to confident advocate gave her credibility with people who'd also been transformed by crisis. "You're good at this," Mama D had told her last month. "Making space for people to find their own paths while providing structure, that's rare." Tonight's dinner was celebratory. 6 months of operation, first programs launched, measurable impact beginning to show. 23 people crowded around, tables on the deck, passing plates family style while conversation flowed. A young woman named Jessica, participant in the retreat program, stood to share her story. Recently released after 5 years in prison for drug charges, she'd struggled to find work or housing. The Foundation's program had provided both, plus training in sustainable agriculture. Now she was applying to community college to study environmental science. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, she said, voice shaking slightly. Everyone told me I'd messed up too bad to recover. But this place, you treated me like I had value. Like my past was part of my story, not the whole story. That changed everything. Ivy watched tears stream down faces around the table, Mama D nodding with recognition, Eliza scribbling notes for oral history documentation, Autumn openly crying. Owen squeezed her hand under the table. This, Ivy thought, this is what the treasure was always meant to become. After dinner, while others lingered over coffee, Ivy and Autumn walked the property boundaries like they'd done that first overwhelming day. So much had changed. The land that had seemed like retreat from overwhelm had become the center of something larger, community, purpose, legacy. "Do you ever regret it?" Autumn asked. "Going public, risking everything, choosing the hard path?" Ivy considered honestly. "Sometimes I miss the fantasy of simple escape. But this, the actual impact, the real work, it's better than any fantasy. Harder, but better. We kept some money," Autumn said. Always the one to voice what others avoided. 2 million. Does that still bother you? Less than I expected, Ivy admitted. We're using it well. The retreat center is self-sustaining now. The investments provide stable income, so we're not dependent on donations. Grandma Sadie was right. You can't help others if you've destroyed yourself. I'm learning that lesson slowly. They reached the old basement entrance, now properly sealed and marked with a historical plaque describing what had been found here. The chamber itself had been carefully documented, then filled in, preserving its history while preventing future theft attempts. "I keep thinking about Isaiah," Autumn said quietly. He made an impossible choice: steal from thieves, risk everything, trust that future generations would continue his work. And we did. We're doing it right now. We are, Ivy agreed, but also doing it differently, finding our own path while honoring his. That's what each generation has to do. Inside, they found one final surprise waiting, a letter from the County Historical Society. They were designating the property a historical landmark, documenting its role as an underground railroad way station and the location of the Liberation treasure discovery. A marker would be installed, recognizing Sarah Crane, Isaiah Washington, Sadie Clark, and the twins' role in bringing the truth to light. "We're part of history now," Autumn said wonderingly, "not just learning it, but making it." That night, unable to sleep with excitement and reflection mixing, Ivy found her way to Sadie's final journal, the one they'd read and reread over these months. She turned to the very last page, the final entry her grandmother had written. "My time is ending, and I face it with less fear than I expected. I'm leaving the burden and the blessing to Ivy and Autumn, trusting they'll be wiser than I was. Here's what I learned too late. The treasure was never the gold. It was the courage to stand for justice even when the cost was high. It was the community built through shared purpose. It was the love that survives disagreement and grows stronger through challenge. It was discovering that wealth means nothing compared to meaning, that security is found in purpose, not money, that legacy isn't what you leave, but who you become. I pray my girls learn this faster than I did. I pray they find partners who steady them when fear strikes. I pray they build something that outlasts them, not through gold, but through changed lives. I pray they're happy, truly happy, in a way I never quite managed. And I pray they understand. You were always the treasure I was protecting. Not the gold in the basement, but the love and courage and possibility I saw in you from the day you were born. Everything else was just preparation for you to find yourselves. Do that. Find yourselves. The rest will follow. All my love, Grandma Sadie." Ivy closed the journal gently, tears streaming freely now. Her grandmother had known, had understood, had trusted them with more than treasure, with transformation. She found Autumn awake too, sitting with Owen and Mama D on the deck under stars that seemed impossibly bright. "Couldn't sleep either?" Autumn asked. "Too much to think about." Ivy settled beside Owen, feeling his solid presence anchor her. "I keep wondering what comes next. We've launched the foundation, established the programs, survived the crisis. What's the encore?" "Living," Mama D said simply. "Building slowly instead of responding to emergency. Teaching the next generation. Loving the people in front of you. That's the real work. The daily commitment to keep choosing right when it would be easier to choose comfort." "That sounds exhausting," Autumn said, but she was smiling. "It is," Owen agreed. "But it's also the only thing worth doing." They sat together as night deepened, this unlikely family built from crisis and choice. A former financial analyst who'd learned that control was illusion and courage was choosing to act despite fear. A graphic designer who'd discovered that dreams mattered less than impact and security came from purpose, not wealth. A contractor who'd found healing through service and love through vulnerability. A historian who'd chosen integrity over career. An elderly woman carrying 5 generations of memory and wisdom, and beyond them, rippling outward. Students receiving scholarships, entrepreneurs getting business grants. Formerly incarcerated people finding second chances, communities slowly healing from generations of injustice. The treasure had become what it was always meant to be, not metal hoarded, but meaning created, not wealth protected, but justice enacted, not past preserved, but future funded. 6 months ago, AV had arrived in these mountains broken and seeking escape. Now she sat at the center of something larger than herself, deeply tired and profoundly content. Terrified of failure and certain of purpose. "I love you all," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the simple declaration. "We love you too," came the chorus of responses. And there, under mountains that had witnessed centuries of human drama, enslavement and resistance, Theft and liberation, secrets kept and truths told. 5 people sat together in the darkness, united not by blood alone, but by the choice to keep trying, keep building, keep transforming pain into purpose, the real treasure. Ivy understood finally. Wasn't what they'd found in the basement. It was this, people connected through shared purpose, love surviving conflict, courage renewed daily, and the knowledge that justice was work without end, but work worth doing anyway. Isaiah had known it. Sarah had lived it. Sadie had protected it. And now they were continuing it, imperfectly, uncertainly, but genuinely. The treasure's story wasn't ending. It was evolving, as it had always evolved, from one generation to the next, and this generation's chapter was only just beginning. 3 years later, the changes had rippled far beyond what any of them imagined that first night under the stars. The foundation had grown from a kitchen table operation to a regional force. 43 students had received full scholarships. 17 small businesses had launched with grant funding, creating 127 local jobs. The restorative justice program had served 89 formerly incarcerated individuals, with a recidivism rate of just 6% compared to the state average of 44%. Numbers that translated to transformed lives, rebuilt families, communities slowly healing. Ivy stood in the foundation's new office, a renovated building in town, donated by a grateful family whose daughter had received a scholarship, reviewing the annual report. Executive Director was now her official title, and she'd grown into it fully. The anxious woman who'd arrived 3 years ago felt like a different person, though Ivy knew that wasn't quite right. She was the same person, just one who'd finally learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. Owen appeared with lunch, a ritual they'd maintained even after getting married last spring in a simple ceremony on the property. Mama D officiating with words that had made everyone cry. He was now the foundation's director of operations, his construction skills redirected toward building futures rather than just structures. Eliza's exhibit is getting national press, he said, showing her his phone. Smithsonian is interested in a traveling version, and the academic journals are calling it a paradigm shift in how we understand Civil War resistance narratives. The museum exhibit had opened to overwhelming response. School groups came weekly. Historians visited from across the country. And critically, descendant communities saw their ancestors' courage recognized and honored in ways that had never happened before. Isaiah's story, Sarah's radicalism, the complex truth of resistance and survival, all documented and celebrated. Autumn's work had expanded too. Her art collective now employed 6 local artists, all creating work that engaged with themes of justice, heritage, and transformation. Her latest project, a series of murals throughout the county depicting local civil rights history, had become a tourist attraction and a source of community pride. She'd recently learned she was pregnant, and the joy radiating from her and her partner was infectious. "We're going to raise this child surrounded by this work," Autumn had said, hand on her still flat belly. "They'll grow up knowing that justice isn't abstract. It's the daily choice to keep building something better." Mama D, now 83, had slowed physically but remained sharp as ever. She spent her days at the Foundation's archive, working with Eliza to document oral histories before they were lost. Her greatest joy was the youth program she'd started, teaching mountain children their own history, the complicated truth of the land they lived on. "History isn't comfortable," she'd tell the students. "Your ancestors might have been enslaved or enslaver, resistance fighter or Confederate soldier, probably both somewhere in your family tree. That's okay. What matters is what you do with that knowledge now." The retreat center had become a model, replicated in 3 other states. Jessica, the formerly incarcerated woman who'd spoken at that first dinner, now managed the program and had just been accepted to graduate school in environmental justice. Her story was one of dozens, lives rebuilt, potential realized, second chances that became first real chances for many. But perhaps the most unexpected development was how the work had changed everyone involved. Ivy had learned that leadership meant holding space for others' growth, not controlling outcomes. Owen had discovered that his grief over his first wife didn't diminish his capacity for new love. It had actually deepened it. Autumn had found that real impact required patience and persistence, not just passion. Eliza had proven that integrity could coexist with success. Though the path was longer and harder, and Mama D, who'd carried secrets and stories for 7 decades, had finally seen them transform from burden to legacy. On the 3rd anniversary of the treasure's discovery, they gathered again at the homestead, now fully renovated, solar-powered and thriving. The group had grown. Foundation staff, board members, scholarship recipients, program participants, community partners. Over 100 people filled the property for a celebration that felt like family reunion and revival meeting combined. Ivy stood to speak, her voice steady and clear. 3 years ago, my sister and I came here seeking escape. We found everything, but we found challenge and danger and moral complexity. We found our grandmother's legacy and our family's true history. We found purpose that demanded more than we thought we had to give. And in giving it, we found ourselves. She looked at Owen beside her, at Autumn glowing with pregnancy and purpose, at Mama D, whose smile held generations of wisdom, at Eliza, who'd sacrificed security for truth, at all, the faces representing lives changed and futures opened. The gold is gone now, secured in federal vaults, transformed into numbers in foundation accounts, converted from metal to meaning. But what Isaiah and Sarah and Grandma Sadie protected wasn't the gold itself. It was the principle that justice requires action, that legacy is responsibility, that the greatest treasure is always people choosing courage over comfort. That night, after everyone left, the core group sat once more on the deck where this chapter had begun 3 years ago. The mountains rose dark against stars, patient and permanent, bearing witness to another generation, learning that the work of justice never ended but was always worth doing. "I'm tired," Ivy admitted. "Good tired, but tired." "Me too," Autumn agreed. "And I wouldn't change a thing." They sat in comfortable silence, these unlikely guardians of a legacy they'd never expected, bound by choices that kept being renewed daily. The treasure had done its work, transformed from gold to justice, from past to present, from burden to blessing. And somewhere in the darkness, if you believed such things, maybe Sadie smiled, knowing her girls had found what she'd hoped for them. Not peace, which was often just another word for avoidance, but purpose, which was pieces deeper. Truer cousin, the real treasure had always been the courage to keep becoming together, whatever each day required, and that treasure could never be stolen, lost, or spent. It could only be lived. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.